Does social media actually make us lonely, or can it help us to connect?
Young people should have a voice in this, and we should continue to work side by side with them. It's so incredibly nuanced how young people spend any of their time online and on phones. What is maybe being missed is the role that some of these applications, especially an application like Snapchat, does play for social connection and communication.
Loneliless, a podcast to reconnect.
We've never been more connected, and still, so many of us feel more isolated than ever. Our friendships, our work, our activities, and our lives, basically, partly live online and on social media. But how does this impact the way we connect? In today's episode, we speak with Alex Quattrone from Neighbourly Lab UK, a research and innovation organization that is committed to building stronger communities. Alex is the Research and Development Manager at Neighbourly Lab UK, and he will be sharing findings from a recently conducted study in collaboration with Snapchat on the impact of social media on young adults. So I'm curious to find out in this conversation with Alex, does social media actually make us lonely, or can it help us to connect? Hi, Alex. Welcome to Loneliless, and thank you so much for being part of this.
Very excited, yeah. Thank you for inviting me.
Before we dive deeper into your latest work, what actually drew you to the work of connection and community?
Yeah, so when I was reflecting about this podcast, I kind of realized that my whole career and education has kind of all been about building community. So I studied urban planning and worked for a number of years in kind of urban planning and regeneration. And I guess what drew me to that was the idea of sort of building these utopian cities and neighborhoods where, everyone's connecting and thriving and cycling around, and it's a lovely place to be. And then I then kind of worked in activism and movement building, which is kind of all about, was kind of all about how to enable people to step into this role as citizens and sort of work together, to tackle causes that they care about and sort of be part of something and be, have a strong purpose. And all of that kind of is all about people coming together and doing, making the world better and kind of working together to do that. And then the sort of last 3 or 4 years, all my work has all been sort of around co-production and participation. And co-production is all about, again, how to work with people who have lived experience of an issue or a challenge, and sort of creating the processes and platform for those people to work alongside policymakers and government and, the people in power, and to sort of design and shape things to kind of reflect their lived experience. And then finally, working at the wonderful Neighbourly Lab is kind of more about research about how social connection can work better in communities, and doing research and testing ideas about what can improve social connection. So yeah, I think weirdly I'm obsessed with community building and social connection, and yeah, I guess also from personal experience of kind of moving to London, and certainly experiencing periods of feeling lonely myself, and just knowing, I guess firsthand from lived experience, how that can feel. And so, yeah, I guess I feel like community and social connection are just so important to our well-being and to everything that we do. So yeah, very, very fitting that I'm here today, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. You also mentioned Neighbourly Lab. So can you tell us more about your work at Neighbourly Lab and its mission?
Yeah, so our mission is about creating more connected and thriving communities across the UK. We're a non-for-profit research and innovation organisation, so most of our work is around research, co-design, and sort of innovation stuff. So sort of testing interventions and projects kind of in communities. And we have the kind of three broad areas that we focus on. So one is around social infrastructure. So that's the kind of spaces and places in our neighborhoods, in our cities, where people can meet and mix, build relationships. Then there's one around inclusive service provision, which is about how to create services working with people that have lived experience of it, so those services work better for them. And then there's an area around kind of welcoming newcomers into places. Lots of sort of jargon there, but essentially those three areas kind of all work together. So, to kind of welcome newcomers into an area, you need good services that kind of work for people, and you need spaces and places where they can meet new people and mix and kind of create those connections. So those three areas all sort of feed into each other, or they're supposed to.
Thank you, Alex, for sharing some glimpses into your work. Let's dive right into the actual topic of today's episode on finding connection in a digital age. And I would like to start by contextualizing the current data that we have on young people and loneliness. We often highlight the statistics from Germany indicating that 1 in 4 young adults often feels lonely. And I also remember work that you mentioned from the UK that recently indicated young people aged 16 to 29 being twice as likely to experience loneliness as the general population. So what is driving that trend, actually?
I guess there's a few reasons that are driving the trend in terms of why young people are more likely to experience loneliness than the general population. And I guess like first of all, it's about at that age, like young people are really sensitive and insecure about friends and friendships, and it's this kind of period of time where all of that insecurity is just heightened. When you sort of join secondary school and college and university, this is the first time that young people are really moving away from family, parental relationships and kind of building their social worlds for the first time. So with that comes lots of opportunity, but also comes lots of pressure and not really knowing how to do it, and so I think that sensitivity, it makes loneliness more likely, because you feel like, as a young person, you maybe feel like you don't have enough friends, or you're not doing it right, or maybe you don't have enough plans, and what am I doing wrong? So I think there's a kind of sensitivity element to it. I think also during especially kind of age 13 to 24, it's this kind of transitional moment where every 2 to 3 years you're sort of transitioning to the next life stage, so it's like you join secondary school, maybe having been at primary school where you sort of knew everyone, and suddenly you're in this bigger environment where you don't know everyone, and you've got to do GCSEs, and important exams are coming up, and then suddenly you finish that and you have to go to college and pick a trade, and then you go to university and potentially move away from your home for the first time, and then you've got to get a job, so it's just kind of relentless transitions and having to start over and build and rebuild like your social network. And what we know about loneliness is that transitions are the moment where you're most likely to feel lonely, because you're vulnerable and you don't have that support network around you, and everything's changing. And then I guess this third thing about, that kind of young people and teenagers especially are more resource poor than adults, and the social worlds at the moment, a lot of it is set up for money. So if you want to socialize with people, if you want to go to a cafe or a restaurant or the pub or whatever that is, you've kind of got to spend money to do it. And young people, a lot of people don't have a lot of money to do that, so it just makes socializing harder. So yeah, I think there's a lot of factors driving it, and obviously also the sort of impact and influence of the online world, and how to manage that is obviously having a is difficult to do as well. So yeah.
I personally experienced loneliness when I had just moved and started my studies, and I can absolutely relate to what you said about vulnerability during those times of transition. Alex, you've recently conducted a study with Snapchat that was aiming to understand the impact of social media on young people. And there's obviously so much to discuss around young people and the use of social media and its potential, impacts. So I'm super curious to find out more about your work and the findings from this study. What does the data actually tell us about online activity of young people and how they connect?
Yeah, so I guess my first take is just that it's so incredibly nuanced how young people spend any of their time online and on phones that like I think this sort of this kind of black and white distinction between, social media and technology is bad and everything that came before that is positive is not a very I guess it's not a very helpful one, and it misses all the nuance underlying it. Our study, commissioned by Snapchat, was looking into the social value of social media and sort of tech platforms for young people. And as part of that, we did ethnography across the UK, so deep dive interviews with young people across the UK to understand how they use their phones, how they use Snapchat, the role it has in their lives, and the impact it has on them on their day to day. And so as part of that, we looked into Snapchat, but then we also looked into all of these other applications that people use. And we also had a UK-wide survey to understand a bit more about that as well. And so yeah, I guess I'm kind of saying that because we kind of looked at everything that they do on their phones, and I guess the kind of first like learning that maybe is obvious, but maybe less, like maybe not that obvious, is that young people they spend lots of time on their phone, but when they're spending that time on their phone, they do such a wide range of activities. They use such a wide range of applications. They're doing so many different things all the time. So whether that's using Snapchat, WhatsApp, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, the apps are endless, and all those different apps serve a different purpose. And the time spent on their phone could be anything from, you know, being entertained and watching content and sharing content, which is probably at the forefront of everyone's mind, them just kind of doom scrolling, um, which does happen, and like they do use it to kill time and be entertained, like we all do after a stressful day at work or whatever. But then, it also get kind of they also spend time chatting to friends, getting support, um, taking photos and kind of sharing it with people that they know. They use it to kind of build new relationships, find romance. There's kind of so many different things that they're doing. And I guess, yeah, just to say that each of those kind of serves a different purpose in their life. And yeah, and I guess just to the point about sort of social media driving loneliness, what we found uh, is that some apps and some activities do drive more towards, like kind of keeping young people indoors, keeping them sort of viewing content, maybe killing time for a bit too long, whereas there's other applications that are actually more designed and built for social connection and encourage activities that is more like chatting with friends, staying in touch with people, that kind of thing. So yeah, does that answer your question? I feel like I went on a bit of a journey there.
Yeah, absolutely. And it really sounds to me that your study paints a more nuanced picture and that there really is a need for more research and more understanding of those, different applications, how they're used, and also their impact, both maybe in a positive and negative way. And you already mentioned that there is a distinction between different applications and how they're being used. Some applications like Instagram and TikTok are used more for an entertainment and content purpose, while others, especially WhatsApp, for example, are used more to communicate and connect. And if I remember correctly, Snapchat falls somewhere in between. So why is it relevant to make that distinction? and what can we learn from that?
Yeah, I guess it's important, and like just to say this was like one of the most interesting things that came out of this study, because I think, going into it, um as an adult myself, I suppose, like I have this perception of or I had this perception of an application like Snapchat, uh just being for, messing around and viewing content and that kind of thing. But you know like I've said, we kind of soon realized that actually Snapchat, WhatsApp, iMessage, are all built for sort of communication. So for kind of chatting with friends, building relationships, getting and giving support, um, taking pictures of yourself and kind of sharing that, all of those important for social connection. And I guess it's important to make the distinction, because at the moment, um, you know, very rightly, um, social media applications and these big tech companies are under lots of scrutiny in terms of how they protect young people online, how they protect their well-being, the impact that's having on young people, spending 4 to 6 hours, at least every day on these phones. So there's a lot of scrutiny on these applications at the moment. But I think what is maybe being missed is the role that some of these applications, especially an application like Snapchat, does play for social connection and communication. And I think what we learn is that applications that do promote social connection can, and we've heard examples where they do play a really positive impact in the lives of young people. And so taking some of those applications away from them might actually be detrimental, and they might just find another application to sort of do that. So yeah, I think it's important to consider the distinction, and I think, having heard from young people the role that Snapchat does play in terms of communication, I think it would be unfair just to brandish that as something that is content doom scrolling, and to sort of take away a tool that is actually potentially very useful and helpful for their lives. So yeah, and like I think this comes back to the point of like seeing the nuance in this debate, and not just, again, I say this as like not just being an adult and being like, what are they doing on their phones? They're wasting all their, you know, bloody time, whatever, like whatever that is. It's like it's just not helpful. So I think, that distinction is so important, and would then enable sort of government and policymakers to then take a more nuanced approach to like what they do next in terms of how they're going to, control, or like what policies they're going to put in place for these big tech companies to protect young people. Just to add, and what's really important is that, this conversation and narrative should young people should have a voice in this, and like we should continue to work side by side with them. Like, it was only through doing this research and doing these deep dive conversations that we unearthed like some of these wonderful stories about how Snapchat, has helped someone, um, helped a young person to start their first relationship, and how it helped a young person to kind of move to college because it, helped them to stay connected to people back home. So yeah, so like, throughout this, like we need to like keep kind of championing the voices of young people, because they know what they're doing, and like they know what's really happening. So yeah, I just wanted to like just kind of add that in, because like without this process we kind of wouldn't have got to like this sort of nuanced understanding, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. And that again underlines the importance of participatory designs. So having young people on board, hearing their voices is so essential. And I think your study really showed how this is possible and how essential it is. So another thing that I find very interesting is this question of how much connection we actually want to foster online in comparison to how much we actually want to, well, enhance and support real world connection, right? Are there any interesting insights or takeaways from your study or in general that help us understand how those online platforms maybe can even support real world connection and activities?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think that is like, yeah, I think that's also a really important thing that we learn about, so an application like Snapchat and other applications, like whilst they should enable conversation and connection to happen on the platform, ultimately real life connection is so important for building relationships and like will remain important, now and in an age where there's even more technology and sort of, space online. And yeah, what we learned from the study, again, just kind of using Snapchat as an example, but I'm sure other applications might do this as well, was how it was the kind of relationship between the online and IRL world and how they kind of supported and enhanced one another. So what we learned that, like, first of all, the online space is often where in real life events are organized and planned. So and I'm sure we can both relate to this, like using WhatsApp or whatever we use, is that, young people were planning activities in real life, through conversations, through kind of group chats. Snap maps also came up as an interesting feature that actually, not only were young people sort of planning something, but they were then able to sort of find a location to meet, like a cafe or whatever, on SnapMap. And so, and I guess that sort of process and that kind of pattern continues. So, it'd be, plan something on the app, go do it, reflect online, go plan something else, that kind of like bouncing in between is something that we learn, and something that, feels like the online world is kind of supporting and helping to facilitate, I suppose.
So, what are the next steps and the way forward with this study and the findings? Are there any new projects coming up? Anything concrete that you're planning to do with those findings?
Yes. Well, so we're going to be launching the findings soon. So I'm not sure when this podcast is airing, but yeah, in sort of early November we're going to launch the findings, where we're going to be hosting a roundtable led by King's College London, who are also partners on this work. Sort of very, kind of very well-known university in the UK. And that roundtable is going to invite policymakers, people from government, people with power, to sort of hear the findings and think about what that means in terms of policy going forward. So we hope it will, have an impact, hopefully, on government policy moving forward. And yeah, I guess really, like, something interesting that we could do next is, now that we've explored the perspective of young people in social media, I guess we're now also interested to learn about the perspectives of other people on young people using social media. So learning from parents or carers, like, about their perspectives on their kids and the people that they care about to use social media, and to understand kind of, I suppose, like what the barriers and issues are for them. Because if we can then understand that, then we can think about, okay, so, how can we make it safe and useful for young people, but then also how can we give, the people that care for them more, like, how can we make them feel happy about about what young people are doing online, whether that's them being more involved or, who knows what that is. But I suppose that's the kind of next part of the debate, is like, how to get the people who perhaps get the kind of biggest critics of it, how to get them more on side and sort of start to design these platforms so it also gives them the reassurances that they need.
That sounds very exciting, and again underlines the relevance of cross-sector collaboration and communication. I'm absolutely curious to follow along and see where that goes. And we will definitely link your findings and the study in the show notes for anyone who is interested in looking further into those. I can absolutely recommend that. Towards the end of this discussion, I would like to take a bit of a practical and personal angle. So, for someone listening right now who feels disconnected, what is maybe one small step they can take towards feeling more connected?
Great question. I guess like just to talk from personal experience, like, I said, like I've definitely experienced periods of loneliness and have experimented with lots of different ways to feel more connected to people and build community. And for anyone who follows me on Strava, you'll know that I'm a very keen runner. Sort of started running in like during the lockdown and kind of continued it. And like as part of that, something I did was join a running club called the Outrunners. Like, so they're kind of a youth. So they're a running club based in East London, and they also support young people to run and do physical activity. They're brilliant. Joining that running club. So running was something I loved, but did in isolation. I still enjoyed it. I still went out on great runs by myself, um, but always by myself. And when I joined this running club and started going every week, it was great because I basically was doing something I loved, and I was doing it with people who also enjoyed doing it, and I made some really great friends from it. And like, this year I went on 2 running holidays, although you might not think running is a holiday, but I mean, it kind of isn't. But I went on 2 running holidays and with this, with these friends, and it was great. And so I guess what I'd say, like my main piece of advice is to kind of think about an activity that you just genuinely enjoy and go make a plan to sort of do that with someone you know or with a group of people that enjoy it. And just try and make a habit of it, So if you like running, do you have friends that you can go with? Is there a group that you can join? Or if it's knitting or poetry or whatever that is, go and do that thing with other people and try and make it a habit. So even when you don't really fancy going, go anyway, is what I would say. That's something that's kind of really, really helped me. So I hope that's helpful.
Well, thank you, Alex, also for sharing those personal insights. I also like the emphasis on reflecting on maybe what you like, what brings you joy, what you already do, and then think of how to build something around it. So again, Alex, thank you so much for this wonderful conversations and for all the insights that you shared on your work and on your study, but also personal insights towards the end. Alex, are there any last comments, questions, or thoughts on your mind?
Thank you for having me. I think this space of young people and loneliness is so important, and I think there's so much more interesting research and thinking that we can do. And like the podcast like this is brilliant for bringing in different people to discuss that and hopefully help the listeners as well. So it's been a pleasure. So thank you so much for having me.
Once again, thank you, Alex, and thank you out there for listening. I really hope you enjoyed today's episode. What is your take on social media and connection? How do these platforms help you feel connected? Please let us know in the comments and say hi on social media. We hope you enjoyed this episode of Loneliless. See you in the next episode. Bye!